Hey, so today we're going to be looking at the film Turning Red. My familiarity with this film is extremely limited. I actually saw this film while it was playing in a classroom that I was subbing. And obviously, most of my attention had to go towards making sure the students weren't murdering each other. But I did get a sense of the film, and I really enjoyed what I did see of it, and I wanted to return to it, and I thought this would be a cool way to return to it. I do have a few predictions based on what I did see in the film. Um, I know Pixar films use mise-en-scène a lot, so I'm really going to pay a lot of attention to details that appear in the background, particularly in bedrooms. Um, and color is always something that is used a lot in animated films. So I'll be looking at color, and I'm really going to be looking at how spaces are depicted, because if, our main character is, growing and shrinking, it seems obvious to me that the way spaces are represented to us is going to be significant. So let's dive into it. Okay, I've captured my first series of images here. It's a Pixar film. There are a lot of them. It throws so much information at you so fast. So we've gotten as far as the point where we've gotten through the opening title sequence, and yeah, we'll go from there. So we have a montage consisting of a series of images that have been collected, sort of capturing and representing May's youth, beginning with the first image we were given in the film of Mei Lin presenting her mother I guess it's tea, I guess, and she's obviously in a position kneeling here, to present something to her mother that jumps out at me as like seeking validation or approval. And obviously, the kneeling position itself, subordinating herself to her mother's desires, feels important here. I think it's interesting that it is represented as a two-shot, though, where they do both sort of share the image. It's obviously interesting that the father's in the background. He appears in the background, I think, in every single image that he's in. So she's very fixated on her mother, and then her father's somebody that she, at least in the photographs, doesn't seem to see as not as clearly, but as presently as she does her mother. We see her engaged in a lot of activities in these photographs. So in this one, I mean, I'll tell you about mom's combing her hair, but it's interesting that Malin is doing what her mother is doing. So she is practicing this act of care. And you got this cool size thing happening where, mom's larger and then she's middle-sized and the doll is small. And given what I know about the film, and as I said, kind of expecting the film to play with size a bit, that feels significant to me. Obviously, the idea that every single one of these images is a photograph of some kind, and that there is this sense of containment, is very significant given what May is talking about here of, needing to honor your parents and live up to their expectations and desires for you. And we can see that a lot of the things that she is doing as a child are planning for the future, right? So even in this image, this could be seen as planning for inhabiting motherhood, right? And learning to look forward to that being a space that you inhabit. And then, the idea of becoming a business person who runs your own business. And I think this image is them at temple, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, pretty sure here. We also see that there's a lot of joy here. It does not seem that in the earlier stages of her life that these are activities that are being forced on May that she is not enjoying. It looks like she very much enjoyed this camp. I mean, look at that smile. And, she's very much enjoying this activity as well. So this is not forced joy that I'm seeing here. Let's keep going here. Singing together. You could also see this is practicing art and joy together. Again, it looks genuine. I also like how in a lot of these images there is a real sense of bonding between the mother and the daughter. She's kind of embracing her here or holding her. They often make hand gestures together, peace signs together. So there's a shared language between them that I'm seeing. Let's continue. May talks about a lot of food, lots and lots of food. And I'm noticing these experiences are not all visual. This is a like an oral activity. Singing also, is something oriented around one's mouth. You have the attention being drawn to the eyes here. But sometimes there's also tactileness that I'm noticing, that the texture of the sweater and the texture of the jeans. There's a softness here. The image even kind of it's both got that quality of being an old photo, but the nostalgia of the old photo having this soft quality to it, I think is intentional here. Everything feels very safe, very comfortable, very warm. So we saw her being a business leader, playing sports. I think that's good parenting when you just expose your child to lots and lots of activities and just give them the opportunity to experience lots of things. There is an emphasis, it seems, to be good at things. They got first place here, and there's pride in that. So it doesn't surprise me that, in the beginning, in this first image, when she's presenting this, again, it is tea, right? When she's presenting tea to her mother, that there's really a sense of doing well and being enough. I know that sometimes we as children feel like there's this expectation that we need to live up to some sort of ideal. And sometimes we impose that on ourselves. Sometimes our parents impose that on us. It isn't clear at this stage of the film whether this perception she has of needing to live up to her mother's expectations of her is self-imposed or externally imposed on her. This image is fantastic. I guess what's interesting to me about this image is that there's, what is being seen. The eyes are so important in so many of these shots, the eye contact. And sometimes when you really connect with somebody, you can sit with them in silence. But here it's almost like they're not only sitting in silence, they're sitting in blindness, and the connection is still there. They still feel each other. They're still present with each other. That's very cool. This comes up in the later images we're going to look at, but there's a real sense of pride in both heritage, but also the city that they come from in Canada. Oh gosh, do I gotta look this up? I haven't traveled through Canada too much. Hold on, I'm gonna look this up. All right, yeah, I had to look that up. That was Ontario. So yeah, the pride for the city and loving the city that she grew up in is very evident here. We'll talk more about that later. Okay, so this is when we return after the montage and see all these photographs. This is when we return to the original photograph, and she comes to life within the photograph. She's no longer still. She animates, she looks at the camera, she takes on a whole bunch of attitude, and then we get a shot of her feet, which I didn't show here, of her sandals, and she jumps out of the photograph and onto the street of Ontario. And then we get, a shot of her shoes as she lands on the street of Ontario. So it's her breaking out of this constructed boundary that she is starting to feel like is imposed on her and breaking out of it, which is, a part of being a teenager. It's part of what you have to do. But there does seem to be this tension surrounding living up to and respecting her her parents. And it really seems to be focused on her mother, right? Like the eyes are on her mother, not on the father as much. And the father's sort of in the background. And we might imagine that here it's the father taking the photographs too often, right? All right, that covers that. So we get our introduction to her outside the photographs, and she's inhabiting the city, right? And she seems very comfortable in the city, and there seems to be a lot of pride. I'll note that this is a slight low angle shot of her. We are looking up at her with a younger character who is, not necessarily grown to her full height. This is clearly a choice to represent her this way, to empower her. Oh, I think this is the color. Okay, so she turns into this creature later in the film. I'm noticing, is her eye color the same color as the creature? I don't know if that's accurate. I'd have to look at that later. We may not get far enough in the film for her to actually undergo any transformations yet. But she draws attention to this. I forget what these devices are called. It's one of these devices where like you have to care for it, and it needs to eat, and it needs things, and so you interact with it, and and this obviously goes back to this idea of caring for something, and I don't necessarily see this as motherhood precisely. To me, it reads more as wanting to care for something as a way of becoming an adult. She seems to be very fixated on wanting to be an adult and to do the things that adults do. I guess I may have to look up what is inside this case. I'm guessing maybe it's a flute, but I don't remember. But she has this case, and then her identity is stamped all over this case. She loves math. You see a lot of desire to care for don't litter, save the whales, to care for the world, to care for the spaces she inhabits, love for her city, again, and for her country here as well. Yeah, I think that's enough of that. Okay, so, like a teenager, she's awkward, she's clumsy, she spills things, she drops things, she falls over. And there's that, the awkwardness and the humiliation. Humiliation is taking it too far. There's the embarrassment, right, of still not being a fully formed and fully inhabited version of yourself where you are natural within yourself yet. This is not the only instance we'll see here of this in this series of images. Okay, so here she's showing the card that she uses to get on the bus. It says that she's an adult. And what's so funny about this to me is like it lists the range of ages for adult from 13 to 65, and she would only be proud of this the year she gets it. So it is, I mean, I'm assuming that she is 13 years old. This would be the only year she would be so proud to have this card. It's even got this little gold it caught the light, and there's a little gold explode. I don't even know what to call that. There's a little gold explosion of light there, stamping it as this incredible achievement that she's gotten this card, and she gets to call herself an adult. Then we see her on the bus, and she's sitting next to this businessman, and she tries to relate with him, and sort of like, tries to relate with him, and the guy just kind of stares at her. But there's this desire in her to take on adult things, right? To do what adults do, and to inhabit those spaces comfortably as they do. And it's cool. Her parents spent a lot of time showing her aspects of her life that may or are intended to be a part of her future. And they apparently did a good job of this because she's excited about the future. She's excited to become all of these things, and I think that's really cool. And then I guess that brings us to the actual opening title sequence. And she interacts with the title sequence in a lot of interesting ways. I thought when she kind of chomps and eats the Disney Presents title, that was the most interesting to me because, again, it's about her kind of eating and chomping on things. And that one jumped out the most to me as maybe being indicative of something about her, and me too, by the way. Oral fixations. So, and then we get the actual title, and I'm almost done here. The choice to depict the city of Ontario with these pastel colors, to me, seems like a really loving, soft way of representing her city. To me, it shows the relationship that she has with the city that she inhabits. The fluffiness of the clouds. This space just feels so incredibly safe, the way she is choosing to represent it to us. And I think the choice to represent the letters in this very reflective, I don't want to say plastic, it almost reminds me of those like soft squeezable, like cushioned. Again, there's just so much softness there, and there's bounciness to the choice of the way to represent the letters. Very interesting choice. I think there's more to this, but I'm not landing on anything at the moment. And is this our last image? No, then the last image, oh yeah, very importantly, last image, the title collapses on her again, and we get another one of these moments of collapse, stumbling, embarrassment, awkwardness. And because of how they chose to represent the letters and how it jumped out to me as having a softness. You know, it could also just be hard plastic, right? But to me, it feels more like soft plastic that's squishable. This itself is safe and okay. And yeah, that was a very, very long initial encountering of this film, but Pixar films are a lot, so I'm not going to apologize too much for it. So let's see what the observatory has to say and go from there. Okay, so I literally lost all of my dictation, so I had to redo it as best I could. So it was a little different, but here it goes. Let's see what the observatory has to say. Oh, I didn't upload the images. It can't see. I'm just a disaster this morning. All right, images 1 through 10. I love that you resisted turning the montage into strict parents. Yeah, they don't feel controlling to me as they're presented to us here. Yeah, there's joy. Oh yeah, and the images absolutely don't look like punishment. And you know, sometimes your parents ask you to take a photograph again, and you can sense that, like, I don't want you to take a picture of me like in the picture when it's taken, but I don't see any of that. Like genuine participation. She's delighted. All right, so it's talking about caring for the doll and caring for the electronic pet. Right, not toys, but their care. It's the relationship between her and the thing that matters. Yep. Yeah, so now they're doing the face treatment and they're sitting together in blindness. Well, yeah, and it is trust and it is about intimacy too, but yeah, it's like tactile. We're getting all these different ways of being introduced to these characters that aren't just visual. All right, so here it's talking about when she jumps out of the photograph from the first image. She doesn't just enter life, she exits representation. That's a really great way of putting it. And it is different, absolutely. She isn't merely leaving childhood, she's leaving a contained image of herself. Oh, this is something I said in my dictation, she fall down, go boom, but I didn't say it for you. So, like I said, the dictation was a little different the second time around. Yeah, but the distinction between embarrassment and humiliation. And she's embarrassed, but she's not humiliated. Which connects to how there's much more of a sense of pride in her than in some kids. You know, some kids it's much more about humiliation than it is about embarrassment, and there is a distinction there. All right, let's talk about the bus pass. Oh, so something I talked to my second dictation about was how big the bus pass was in the image. I noticed, you know, different things in my second encountering here, and the scale of the pass. It's like a monument. I didn't say that in either dictation, but the card becomes enormous. It's absurdly important. And children do experience milestones like that. Absolutely. Oh yeah, so okay, here the observatory is talking about the letters, the shiny red letters that depict turning red as a title. Are they plastic? Are they padded? Are they toys? Are they kindergarten blocks? The kindergarten blocks is something I said in my second dictation. And I'm not sure. But yeah, I think the important thing here is that regardless of which version they are, kindergarten blocks, toys, padded, squishy things, or plastic, they're all safe, right? The idea is they're all childlike, they're all safe. All right, so I was talking about Ontario having this softness to it, and Observatory is advising me to say that instead of saying that she loves Ontario, the world is currently presenting itself to her as being gentle. I think that's very accurate. The world feels perhaps safe to her, and that the world could change, right? That perception could change over the course of the film, for sure. Yeah, and something I'd like to work on moving forward is trying to land on more flexible observations than trying to stamp things as concretely as I sometimes do. I like that it keeps nudging me in that direction. It's like when you're doing meditation like calm.com, right? And you're just trying to notice and you're not trying to like put a label on things as much. I know that part of this encountering process, we are trying to pull some ideas out of what we're looking at. So there is that desire to find some sort of meaning. But, we could encounter a film where we literally just strike out, where the observatory and I both strike out on the movie completely. And that's okay too. That's just a part of encountering and inhabiting and noticing, right? And sometimes you can just notice that we're not seeing an emerging pattern. But, Pixar films are unlikely to be that way. All right, something quietly emerging. We're talking about containment. Yep. Graduated containment, perhaps, being something that is more relevant here. All right, almost every space in the opening images seems to invite movement in the next larger space. Photograph, bedroom, house, street, bus, city. That's a very good observation. She's constantly entering progressively larger worlds. Not breaking free, but expanding. That is subtly different. Agreed. It is less escape. More inhabiting progressively larger circles, which is, the way we might perceive growing up, right? There again, yeah, I don't know if that survives the film as an observation, but it feels like something we should pay attention to. Yes, something to be preserved. I'm having a lot of trouble finding the words I need to say what I'm trying to say. Yeah, that's come up over the last couple encounterings, right? So the observatory is saying, I actually think that's becoming one of the healthiest indicators in these encounterings. We were talking in the last episode about how trying to attach language to things is another tendency where it's like we feel this need to label things with words, and sometimes it's just about noticing. It says, because it's often where you're standing right beside something genuinely new. Exactly, when language becomes difficult. Oh, that's a good way of putting it. It's like these are the moments when perception has outrun vocabulary. It's outpaced it. And then you catch up later, right? You find the words later. And it doesn't have to happen now. It can happen down the road when you're an hour into the film. You find the words finally. Yeah, I don't need to force the sentence. All right, now we're going to go through it again. Now I can see the images, so this is going to reveal more things. All right, I think your overall reading the montage is strong and give yourself credit for. It isn't pressure, right? It's about participation. They're documenting shared life, serving tea together, brushing hair together, going to the business convention together, temple together, singing together, eating together, badminton, facial treatments, right? It's not just good memories. It's a child learning adulthood by co-inhabiting it with her, well, it seems like mostly with her mom. So something I talked about was like the size thing of the mom being big. It's like Goldilocks, right? The mom being big, her being in the middle, the doll being small. They're literally nested, right? Yeah. Care is being modeled, initiated, rehearsed. All right, so in this image, the dad looks almost bewildered and the mom looks proud. I agree. The dad does sometimes look a little bewildered, standing in the background, not sure, how to interact with what's happening around him. And that's okay. He doesn't have to be anything other than what he and who he is. Yeah, and agree. The emotional triangle is funny. Oh, so in image 4, standing on the threshold. Was image 4 when they're outside of the temple? Okay. Yes, they're standing outside on the threshold. It's not a temple. The temple isn't somewhere they necessarily belong. It's somewhere they repeatedly enter. That's interesting. All right, so in image 5... All right, so they aren't practicing. They're performing together. There isn't a teacher. Yeah, it's almost like karaoke, right? There isn't an audience. They're just simply sharing joy. Agreed. All right, so the observatory is noticing how comically large May's mouth is in the image, exaggerating appetite. Everything is big. Seems that way to a child, right? Going back to image 7. All right, so I focus on winning, and it's noticing the identical pose. Even victory is synchronized. They're almost mirror images of each other. Agreed, because, they are sharing a lot of similar interests here. Yes, how much of May's identity is currently built around mirroring her mother? But yeah, the photograph does quietly ask that question. So yeah, in image 8, the spa masks do remove individuality. That is very, very cool. I missed that observation completely. They're literally wearing the same face. They're relaxing, becoming visually indistinguishable. That is fascinating. All right, the skyline doesn't feel like establishing geography. It feels like establishing affection. It feels like both to me, but yeah, the city is almost painted the way Miyazaki, I love Hayao Miyazaki, almost the way Miyazaki paints villages, soft, pastel, loved. Agreed. Yeah, so she doesn't leave the initial photograph. She walks through it. The frame wasn't a prison, it was a doorway. All right, so it's talking about how the camera zeroed in on the sandals, and then she jumps out of the picture, and then that's matched to her shoes landing on the sidewalk. And this choice by Pixar to intentionally begin with the feet before we meet the person, almost like you know somebody by how they inhabit a world, or like taking a moment to walk a mile in their shoes, right? It's a very Pixar way of thinking. That's cool. Yeah, I missed that. Yeah, so we have the shot of her walking down the sidewalk, low angle shot. I think I emphasized this a little more in my second dictation of her there being this sense of like pride that she's feeling and joy and empowerment. But she's framed against the sky. She's not framed against the buildings. The city almost becomes an extension of her. Yeah, and something I definitely said in the second dictation was that it's not just a low angle shot of her, it's also a low angle shot of the city itself. So the city kind of takes on some of that pride that she feels, and some of that empowerment, and some of that joy. Oh, is that what those little toys or the little interactive devices are called? Tamagotchi? Okay, that sounds familiar. But yeah, the care observation. Notice where it hangs, right over her chest. Oh yeah, it's like it's right over her heart, right? Because it was on the left side of her chest. Oh, cool. It's literally positioned where a pendant would be. Oh, those are great observations. Like a tiny responsibility she wears. Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, so all the stickers in the flute case. They're incredibly earnest. Math piece, don't litter, save whales. They're almost aggressively sincere. No sarcasm, no irony. Feels like a child who still believes goodness is achievable. Well, goodness is still achievable. Yeah, before we lose our innocence, right? Yeah, that is interesting. In the moments of embarrassment, nobody's laughing at her. They're simply looking. And the difference does matter enormously. Imagine it's different when she gets to school and if she trips and falls in the presence of the other teenagers, right? But with adults, yeah, there's no judgment. It's visibility. Hmm. Yeah, so when she holds up the transit pass, the lighting, that tiny sparkle in the pass, Pixar does absolutely love and choose to do that. It's like knighthood. What a great connection. Yeah. Yeah, so everybody else is commuting and she's performing adulthood. Everyone else is living it. That is funny. Adults aren't proud they're adults anymore, but she still is. You kind of hope that, like, I actually can attest to this. I do still feel proud to be an adult. I I tell my students that a lot of people talk to you like you're lucky to be a kid and you don't have all these responsibilities. I always have seen it differently. I love inhabiting an adult space and the freedom associated with it and getting to just have choice um but yeah, not everybody's like that, not everybody is still proud to be an adult and they might see it as a burden, but I guess I see a lot of myself in May, to be honest. The oral fixation coming up here, yeah. The mouth. I laughed because I hadn't thought about your oral fixation observation until seeing it. She's literally eating the studio logo. Yeah, it's impossible to notice once you point it out. Whether it develops, I don't know, but it's certainly being emphasized. Agreed. Yeah, so it agrees with the uncertainty of being able to determine how the letters being represented. They're glossy, rounded, reflective, toy-like. Yeah, and I don't think the important thing is the material. They feel safe, touchable, playable. All right, one observation that's emerging. There's almost no loneliness. Yeah, so even when she's walking down the street by herself, you really feel like she's a part of the city as a space. Absolutely no loneliness. Even when she's centered in the image, absolutely. She's almost always defined through relationship, mother, father, family, community, city. And I mean, when she gets to school, she's gonna talk about all her friendship circle, right? And we're gonna get an introduction to all of her friends. I kind of already saw a preview of that. Objects she cares for. Everything's relational. The first independent image is her stepping out of the photograph, but it's into a city, right? Because independence doesn't begin by rejecting relationship. It begins by inhabiting it differently. Yeah, so when we're looking at the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which was our last encountering, we're talking a lot about scale, and I predicted we'd talk a lot about scale. I think if we made our way deeper in this film, it would come about scale, but without consciously trying, you spent much of the encounter noticing care. Yeah, that's interesting. It's early, that's not what jumped out at me was scale, but care. Because the film told me to. Yeah, so we go into a film and we have these expectations and predictions, but you got to let the film speak for itself. It isn't encountering. You're not encountering what you want to encounter. You're encountering it. It is going to be itself, and you have to notice and recognize what it is. Yeah, to be honest, I had planned to encounter more of this film. I knew that because it was a Pixar film, it was going to be a lot. There's always so much meaning, in my opinion, in animated films, and then Pixar films in particular can really just be very, very dense with meaning. Because of the snafu of the double dictation and the way this has gone, and then me not uploading the images, I'm actually going to call this in particular encountering here because I don't want to get this video get too long, and I think enough ideas are emerging where we could do a re-encountering here. So if you made it this far, despite the chaos of me kind of messing things up a little bit here, then thank you, and I hope that you're excited about this film and that there's something that you'd like to pursue a little more deeply. I'd also like to hear other things you may have noticed that I didn't notice. Have an excellent day.